Hey guys, it's Boy. Today we're going to be talking about one of DC's most craziest, wackiest villains, in my opinion. Because doing this research for this character, honestly, it has kind of given me a migraine because of just how insane things get. But we're going to be talking about the character known as the Rider, who I talked about, who was in the Javelin video. But anyway, he first appeared in the comic series written by Grant Morrison called Animal Man. Now, for those who don't know, Grant Morrison, he has a history of doing a lot of good comic books and wacky comic books. Here's some of his comic books. One of them was Batman Rip, in which Batman dies, which was a good story. Then you had Batman Reborn and Batman Robin, where Dick Grayson took up the mantle of Batman and Damian Wayne was Robin, which was a great book series, and also had villains like Professor Pig, the Black Glove, a bunch of characters. And then you also have his very famous run on Doom Patrol, which a lot of it's basing onto, the current series on HBO Max. Now, Animal Man, the story focused on Buddy Baker, who, after years of doing his Animal Man persona, decides to retire, marry his high school sweetheart, have kids, but all of a sudden he destines for something more. He wants to be part of the Justice League International. And he ends up going on TV where he kind of gets made fun of, but he eventually gets his first mission, which involves an ape with a mutant virus in it, as well as Bawana Beast, and it just gets crazy. But he eventually becomes part of the team, and, that's the whole premise of it. But anyway, back to Rider. Throughout the series, we get hints of the Rider. Like in this part right here, we have these writings, which is narrating all these things going on. This is the writer's doing. And the writer's weirdness in this story, or this series, doesn't get weird until issue 5, where you get this character called Crafty Coyote, which is like a ripoff of Wile E. Coyote. And it appears in the story called the Coyote Prophet, and you just have this coyote anamorphic being just walking around the desert in Arizona, who gets a boulder dropped on him, shot at by this guy who believes this thing is like the literal devil and he has to kill it. And we eventually have Animal Man, who comes and meets the coyote, and the coyote gives him this piece of paper. And it tells the story of this cartoon world where violence goes on, almost like Looney Tunes, like, where you have two animals fighting each other, Bugs Bunny versus Daffy, Bugs Bunny versus Elmer Fudd, Foghorn Leghorn versus the dog. I can't remember what the dog's called. Dadgummit. But what we learn is he gets tired of this same old shtick of getting beaten by his nemesis, the Roadrunner. And so he decides to go in the desert, go up in this elevator to see his creator, this artist, pretty much, who you can take this any way as you can, but I assume this is the writer who he's talking about, because it has that same type of text. And the writer, or the creator, he's not too happy with this, so he decides to punish the coyote by sending it to our world and making him, like us. And in the end, he's finally shot by the dude who believes the devil. He dies out with Animal Man holding him. And we zoom out to see a brush. It's real weird. In issue number 8, where Animal Man fights Mirror Master, at the beginning of the story, we have these computers that says, "I can't believe God plays dice with the cosmos," Albert Einstein. And in the end of the story, we have this says, "He doesn't, but I do." This refers to the writer, who I believe has kind of like a God complex. And in issue 14, we have Maxine, Animal Man's daughter, who meets this guy in the backyard who's crying and almost looks like Buddy Baker. Now, we haven't got an explanation on what this is, but we do eventually later on. And also in this issue, you have the first appearance of the writer, where he's walking by the river and talking about a poem he loved from school. He then says, in an interconnected universe, it's hard to tell who's dreaming before walking over to Highwater, who's asleep, and awaking him. Highwater awakes in San Francisco, not knowing how he got there or why he's there, but he assumes it's all leading to Animal Man, because he's been on a trail this whole series. While this is going on, Animal Man's son is playing the Ouija board, and pretty much a thing cracks, and on a piece of paper says Cliff 927. We then see Buddy Baker, who returns home to his wife, who's distraught, who tells him all this weird stuff is happening. He goes outside and sees this guy in the rain, and he wants to know who this guy is. He walks back, and he looks at the window, and in the window it says Cliff 927. We didn't get answers until issue 18 on what this all meant. When finally, in the beginning of the story, we have this computer that says, "At play in the fields of the Lord." And again, we get a look at his God complex he has. And High Waters finally come face to face with Animal Man, who's like, "Look, I've been on this trail from Arizona to Arkham, and it's always these comic book pages, but it all ends in Arizona." So he and Animal Man go to Arizona to this cliff, and they eat these cactuses. And that's where Animal Man sees the source of his power, and I guess he gets to meet it, but there are like all these different animal totems, and oh my gosh, it's crazy. But he finds out there's a second crisis coming, these animal totems warn him that, look, there's a second crisis coming, and you're going to play a part in this. We then have Lennox, Animal Man villain, show up at the doorstep of his wife, and pretty much that's where the issue ended. Issue 19, we begin again with, of course, a computer with a writer who says, "I don't know where to go from here." And he says, "I have an idea." The issue ends with Buddy Baker returning home to find that his family has sadly been killed and just slaughtered. It's very sad because when you read the issue, you kind of feel bad. You do feel bad for him because, So to paraphrase issue 20, 21, and 22 and 23, I'm going to do this real quick. So 20, Buddy grieves his family, and at the end of the story, we have this Buddy Baker. He's in the bathroom, and he gets a phone call. This guy tells him, "Look, I know the people who did this. Here are the names." 22, he fights Lennox and kills him. In 23, he gets a time machine, goes back in time, and we get an explanation on why Maxine saw this guy who looked like Buddy Baker in the backyard. And Grant Morrison is just a genius when it comes to his writing, because it all comes back to full circle. And this reveals to be Buddy Baker, who was in the yard, and he cries because he hasn't seen his daughter because his daughter's been dead. We then switch over to Psycho Pirate, who is in his asylum and pretty much is losing it because he's looking at a comic book of the Flash. Okay, so issue 23, things really start to pop off and get just crazy, zany, wacky, whatever you want to call it. But a lot of it has to do with the aftermath of Crisis on Infinite Earths, where, everybody was killed. Well, most universes were killed, except for the main one. So Psycho Pirate is released from his cell, which is probably the writer's doing because, it's just, I don't know. But Psycho Pirate, for y'all who don't know, played a big role in Crisis on Infinite Earths. He also has the ability to control people's emotions and he can do stuff with that. And in this story, all these characters from Crisis on Infinite Earths that died, they return, and it messes with Psycho Pirate. It messes with his abilities and just causes him to start fading out. Like, he can't control it. Like, it's driving him, psycho. You have, like, Ultraman, all these other characters, like, from Crisis on Infinite Earths. You got a version of Batman, a groovy version of Justice League, and it just drives him crazy. And it's driving me crazy because I don't know, they all show up and they all start realizing, like, look, we're characters in, like, a comic book. Why is our life like this? And you got, like, the origin of Overman. It's like this evil version of Superman who killed Batman, and the other Justice League tried to take him on because of this whole sex virus. Yes, a sex virus. Then you have Ultraman literally falling out of a comic book panel. Like, this is breaking the third wall on a whole different thing. Worse than Deadpool. Like, this is crazy. Okay, so issue 24. The story begins, of course, with keyboards and the writer's writings because, it's the writer. What did you expect? And also explain who caused all this, how Psycho Pirate caused everything. Oh, and Overman has a doomsday device. God knows why. Oh, my lord. But Ultraman tries to fight Overman. He gets his butt whooped. It's a pretty cool fight, but he gets beat pretty easily. Then Highwater pulls Bizarro out of a literal comic, and Bizarro then gets whooped by Overman. This Animal Man then jumps in, and he's eventually able to beat Overman by literally trapping him in a comic book panel. Yeah, this whole issue is just crazy. Oh, Psycho Pirate vanishes at the very end because he's taken on way too much power, and he just completely vanishes. Oh, and Highwater becomes the new Psycho Pirate. Yeah, pretty much. So I guess to keep balance or whatever. But yeah, say hello to your new Psycho Pirate. Okay, so Animal Man 25. let's get into it. So, Buddy ends up in Limbo, which is like this place where all these obscure characters like end up. Like on his way to this house, he runs into Mr. Zero, which is like this older pre-crisis version of Mr. Freeze that was unpopular. And he only reason Mr. Freeze is popular is because of the animated series. So you can thank Bruce Timm for that and Paul Dini. But the story ends with Buddy Baker at the door of this guy who's like, "Hi, I'm Grant, come in." And this is, of course, the writer, who turns out to be Grant Morrison. Okay, so issue 26. This is what we've all been waiting for. Well, the main thing about Ryder and everything. Yeah, I know. It's been a long video, but anyway. So they go inside, Buddy and Grant, and of course Buddy has all these different questions like, "Who are you? What am I doing here? You know, why am I here?" And the writer's like, "Look, I'm the guy behind everything. I'm the evil mastermind." And it kind of sounds kind of satanic that I'm doing all this with your life, but it's just the hand I was dealt. And Buddy's like, "So you're telling me you let my family die and you did all this stuff?" And the writer's like, "Yeah, I pretty much write everything about you." This causes Buddy to go crazy, and he tries to kill the writer by grabbing him and throwing him out the window. But just like any other god, you try throwing him out a door, he's just going to reappear. He reappears and tells him, "Look, you can't kill me because I created you, or I created this story." And he hands Buddy a comic book and he's like, "Look, I wrote this story, and I've also wrote Doom Patrol, but they don't know about that yet. And they won't know about that." So him and Buddy then go on a walk, and he tells them, like, you know, all this different stuff. Like, it's like if you met God, what would the conversation be? He says how he killed his family just so he'd have drama in the comics. Buddy doesn't like this and tells him to look, like, bring them back. And the writer's like, no, this scene needs more action. So he brings out Shark and this other guy to attack Buddy in this brutal fight where Animal Man ends up getting killed. And the writer tells him, "Get up, like, what are you doing? Like, you can't die." He brings him back to life. And him and Buddy have this talk where he's like, "When I was younger, I had a imaginary friend, all this blah, blah, blah." But it's just, his character is so interesting because he doesn't care. It's just like he's just the writer, of course. But eventually in the end, Buddy and the writer decides to send Buddy back to where he came from and give him his family back. And another reason that this is a big deal is because Grant Morrison, this is his final comic book in the Animal Man run. But the story ends with the writer, of course, typing on his computer, continuing Buddy's story. And then we get this flashback of where he says, "When I was younger, I had an imaginary friend, and every night I would go to this mountain and shine this light, and it would shine back at me." Which, to me, it's kind of hard to understand, like, because Grant Morrison, he does a lot of crazy, weird stuff. Either that or I'm just too stupid to understand what's going on. And, of course, we all know the fate of the writer. He was killed in Suicide Squad 58, which I mentioned in my Javelin video. But, yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave a like or a comment. I would like to know how I'm doing. And I think I might be doing Peacemaker next. And if I don't, it'll be some other character. It could be Marvel, it could be DC. You'll just have to wait and see. But yeah, I'm kind of deciding on if it should be Peacemaker or Bloodsport. But we'll see. Anyway, have a good day.